anyone in this country who hasn't personally faced a delay in getting a flat from a developer or not seen someone at least within the family or friend circle worry their guts over a similar situation? The reality is we are dealing with widespread delays in the construction of residential projects across segments, across cities in this country. Why is that happening? And why have we as a nation and consumer accepted such delays as a natural part of the process of buying a home? Hello everyone and welcome to the first real realty debate on NDTV Profit on a subject that concerns everyone, you, me, the developer and even the government. Execution delays. Once a week, we will take up one big issue of real estate in the country and get to the bottom of the problem and thrash out the solutions and the way forward. Let me introduce my panel today, and pretty much it's a 360-degree panel. Mr. Vineet Relia, CEO of Sari Group, a big private equity fund, which is now also into developing in the middle income group projects. Gitambar Anand, Vice President, Credai National and Chairman of ATS. Sameer Jasuja, familiar face by now if you've been watching this show and this space, founder and CEO of Prop Equity, India's best data and analytics company. From the Mumbai studio, we have Kalpesh Mehta, Director, Rohan Lifescapes, who's been with a private equity fund as well, and of course now onto the other side, which is the developer end. Vinod Sampath, advocate and property expert, to take all the consumer angles of this big debate. Before I come to my panelists, here's some data which we've analyzed, and I think we should start with that, which will tell you how big is the problem that we're discussing. We looked at projects which were launched between 2007 and 2009. This is Prop Equity data. These are the projects which should have been completed latest by January 2012. We are sitting in Feb. 3 metropolitan regions were taken for this study, which is National Capital Region, the Mumbai Metropolitan Region and Bangalore Metropolitan Region. I will refer to them as NCR, BMR and MMR. These are the 3 cities. So let's start with the projects. How much was launched in each of these cities? NCR, approximately 320 projects were launched. Mumbai, that's MMR, approximately 1,030 projects were launched. Bangalore Metropolitan Region, approximately 570 projects were launched. Now, that's the big data you should be looking at, and that's what is really the meat of the show. Approximately 45% of the total residential supply that was committed for completion is now witnessing significant execution delays, which means they were to come by January 2012. Not happening. Amongst the 3 metropolitan regions, hold your breath, which is the biggest culprit? Which region is actually delaying projects the most? It is NCR, National Capital Region, accounts for the maximum project delays. Bangalore witnessing the least project execution delays. Curious picture. So I'm going to first go to the guy who's culled out all the data, Sameer Jasuja. Sameer, this is stunning data. We all have faced the problem at some end. If we're not a home buyer, we've heard of stories where execution delays have basically caused a lot of emotional grief to the family. But 45% execution delays in 3 cities. Right.
So basically, if you look at, the main reason behind that is that NCR has contributed a lot to that. Only 23% projects have got executed in NCR, and that's primarily because of the number of projects that are announced over here are very large compared to MMR and BMR. The other big reason is that, the real estate market really picked up after the subprime crisis, and many projects were announced. The developers did not have that kind of execution bandwidth, and when the market started to pick up and there was this private equity opportunity also there, so they kind of used funds from one of the land banks to procure more other land banks, and that has been the main reason why projects have got delayed.
Over-commitment, over-ambition, launching too many projects. Gitambar Anand, I know ATS has a great reputation. You don't have to be accountable for any direct questions here, but you represent Credai. So tell me, is that what happened? Builders and developers got extremely ambitious and kept taking money. What I understand from Sameer simply is that they kept taking money for one project, buying land for another one, and they just overextended themselves.
No, I will not agree with that, because maybe in some cases that could be true. But real estate execution is a very vast subject. You cannot just say it got delayed because of X, Y, Z. There is a labor issue over there. There are sanction issues over there. There are financial issues, how to get your money organized to build what you have committed. Then there are raw material issues. You can't just say, that the builder has a malified intent and he intentionally wants to delay possession because he's actually harming his own reputation. Now, there are two kinds of developers. One is the guy who has no intent to deliver. He, of course, should not be.
So you're agreeing that there is a part of the developer community which gets into this business.
Yeah, they're not
with
so committed.
very honest intentions.
Yes.
Let's just say it.
See, the biggest villain in this whole story, one mustn't forget that the developer is at the mercy of the urban local body for permissions. Now, you can start selling after your plans are sanctioned, but you can't start construction before you get MOEF clearance.
Right.
Now, MOEF clearance has to be taken on a project-to-project basis. This clearance may take 6 months, a year, 18 months. There's no closure here. You apply to the ministry or you apply to the state environment department. You may get your permission in 6 months, you may get it in a year, you may get it in a year and a half, or you may not get it. So we have been pushing as an association with the Ministry of Environment and Forests that you have master plans laid out for all towns and cities. If you have notified a particular master plan, please give the environment clearance for that master plan also, so that as individuals we don't have to go back to the ministry for an MOEF clearance, because these permissions are actually used as a leverage to actually blackmail the developer into maybe sometimes extorting money from him.
All right, so that's a really big statement. So,
Yes.
so here's my next question. I get the gist that
Yeah.
there are lots of delays. It's not in your hands. You're waiting for a lot of approvals, and there is no sanctity to when you will get that approval. It could happen in 6 months. It could happen.
There's another twist to this story. Now, when I have taken that particular land in an auction, I am given a particular period to finish my construction. Let us say they say 5 years from the date of auction, you are supposed to complete the construction.
Right.
My MOEF clearance doesn't come for, let's say, a year and a half. And I have to do more than 1 million square feet, like Sameer very rightly said. The volumes in the NCR are huge. Nobody is doing a development less than 1 million square feet. Whereas in other parts of the country, especially in MMR, they're very small developments. So I may not be able to complete my entire construction in that balanced 3-year period. Then I have to go back to the government to extend my 5-year period for another 2 years. Now, going back to the government again for an extension may take another 6 months.
We're going to come back to this point in terms of how do you resolve that. We have to get together and figure a way out of this. What does the government need to do? But interestingly, this is what I want to know. Nowhere in the world do you sell a project as soon as you acquire land. Vineet, we are very, very unusual as a country. Why should we allow that? Why should we allow a pre-launch?
This is not a pre-launch, Manisha. This is a launch. You've got your permissions. Only one permission, the environmental clearance is pending. And that is supposed to be, because you've taken it on a government auction on a master plan, you should be getting it anyway.
I'm just saying, why not have all your clearances in place?
Make an
Vineet,
important
let me
point.
make a, okay, you go ahead first.
Two things. One is that the amount of construction activity that had to be done by the developers just on the residential side in 2008, 9 and 10 was about 522 million square feet.
522 million.
And
country, yeah.
for 11, 12 and 13 it's gone up to 965 million square feet. So there is a
Gosh.
big 89% increase on the kind of construction that we have to deliver, these developers have to deliver. The second point that I would like to make here is that if the developers are going to take 5 to 6 years to complete a project, they can simply say in their offer document that, we're going to take 5 years, clearances take that much time. Why do they say that we're going to complete the project in 3 years, and then they also recognize that there are going to be delays in the projects?
That's a very important point.
Very right.
I think if somebody is prepared that, look, why don't you take the outer limit of what it could be? It could be 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, but why don't you build an outer limit, build a little bit of cushion, and then come to the consumer with an absolutely true story. But I still want to come back to that point, Vineet, that we are very unusual. Half of this problem happens because nowhere in the world does a consumer buy a property on paper. they buy a fully constructed property. Is it a demand-supply imbalance in the country which is making all of us rush to any project launch without even verifying the builder's credentials and go and book that flat? What's going on?
The way I would look at it, there are two angles to it. One, you have a section of consumers today which are primarily, what we call in our internal parlance as I-user. These are investor users, These guys are always scouting around for pre-launch deals. Because what happens in every project is you have three aspects to the project. You have approvals, you have liquidity, you need money to really execute, and the third is your infrastructure and wherewithal bandwidth to really execute the thing physically. Right? Now, if you look at all three individually, approvals is one, like Gitambar said correctly, it's really not in the developer's control. You're dependent on an external agency.
And I totally agree. That is something that's a very big debate on how do we resolve that for the industries.
Yeah, that's like an industry debate with the government which will go on, right? The second is about liquidity. Liquidity also, if you look at what has happened is that, when you go book, consumers pay a very meager amount at that point of time. Now, the company might have liquidity or will look at banks. The banks don't fund real estate anymore. They're like so stringent about it.
That's now. Vinny, the data we have is 2007, 2009. The monies were coming in. It was really a case, as Samir pointed out, of overextension. Then why go ahead?
Was bad. No money was coming in. After 8 and 9, there was a total squeeze on liquidity for the real estate sector. Total. Banks were not lending. Risk weightages were increased tremendously.
Then shouldn't you be even more cautious about launching projects when you know that the money couldn't come in?
Yeah, but if you have an option where there are consumers offering, so the developer is also naturally going to fall into that, okay, there is funding which is coming. I don't need a heavy discount there. I would have paid interest. Let me give a basic discount here.
Okay, so I'm sorry. I have to play the devil's advocate here. I'm still coming back to those two big issues. But Kalpesh is there. Kalpesh, you've come back to the country. Are we unusual? Do execution delays happen world over? Are we unusual in launching a project way too early, before all the permissions have been granted, before funding has been fully tied up? Is that the crux of the problem?
I think the problem is several-fold. The two big categories of issues are, the first is regulatory issues, and we've covered that adequately. I think the second issue that the developer community, all of us need to honestly look at and address is that, our organizations are not fully scaled up to handle the kind of work that we've taken on. In the last 5 years, most developers took on a lot more projects than they'd handled in 5 years prior to that. And the organizations didn't scale up, right? So to be able to deliver 5 to 10 million square feet, or to be working on 5 to 10 million square feet at a time, your business needs to run like a well-oiled manufacturing machine. You need to have product teams that are designing products based on input from the sales teams, which are being drawn from detailed market research, and then being fed into the construction team that works like a factory, like an assembly line, churning out product quickly that is being sold in a very methodical manner. And to achieve all of that, you need organizations with strong leaders, with strong managers, with skilled laborers, and these people need to have years of experience. And guess what? The Indian real estate sector does not have the experience in enough quantities. So all of us are struggling to scale up our organization. This is a multidimensional problem, right? If it was just the regulatory issues, things would have been not this bad. If it was just the fact that there's labor shortage, there's management shortage in the business, things would not have been that bad. But you combine these issues with the issue of liquidity, with the issue of the markets going up and down. Anytime you add more dimensions to a problem, things get overcomplicated, and I think that's what you're facing. The sector is still nascent, in my opinion, in its ability to handle this much workload. But things are fast changing. To answer your question about how real estate is sold outside of India versus in India, there are plenty of markets around the world where projects are sold, in a pre-launch manner, before construction has even started. Markets vary in terms of what they require. New York, for example, you have to have all your approvals in place. You have to have your condo documents signed. It's a function of the market. There is no easy answer for India. All I know that is if we instituted something like that in India right now, the sector overall, and that includes the developers, that includes the financiers, and that includes the consumers, they would all suffer.
You're saying that the real estate industry needs a lot of growing up to do. It's not just one issue, regulatory issue, yes, but there are labor issues, there are cash flow issues, and clearly there are management issues within the real estate sector. That's a lot to talk about. I'm going to come back and actually look at each of these issues and say, how are we going to actually resolve them? Because the industry has to mature, as Kalpesh just pointed out, and we all suffer because of all these issues and execution delays. We'll be right back. We're actually looking at a very, very big issue that affects all of us, execution delays in residential construction across the country. On NDTV Profit. It is the property show. Every week we will be taking a big debate topic and thrashing it out with an eminent panel. Residential construction accounts for nearly 70% of the activity in the Indian real estate sector. And guess what? Approximately 45% of the total residential supply that was committed for completion by January 2012 is witnessing significant execution delays. And that's our topic of discussion. I'll reintroduce my panelists, Vineet Relia, CEO of Sare Group. I also have with me Gitambar Anand, Vice President, CREDAI National, Sameer Jasuja, Founder, CEO of Prop Equity, Mumbai Studio, Kalpesh Mehta, Director, Rohan Lifescapes, and of course, Vinod Sampath, Advocate and Property Expert. Right before the break, we were talking about how regulatory issues are the first hurdle that builders have to cross. And that's, according to you, the big reason and not the liquidity crunch which is causing all the delays. I will come back to that question, Mr. Anand. Why would you not actually announce a project after you've got all your clearances?
You see, this industry is a very capital intensive industry, and unfortunately there is not much access to capital for this industry except mostly from the private equity sector, which is a very expensive proposal. As a compulsion, developers have no other choice but to look at sales, aggressively to raise capital. Had the banks been more, cooperative in lending to the sector under directions from the RBI, which is not so, then this problem would definitely not arise. And I say this because when you sell early, you sell cheap. If you sell on a finished product, you get much more revenue. So why would anybody sell early? It's out of compulsion. If you get capital at, say, at 12 to 13% from the bank, you can start your construction and you can start selling as you go along. And if the customer is comfortable with the track record of the developer, he can invest with the developer. So like I said, it is something which has driven the developers to do this. It's a lack of capital which has driven developers to do this.
So it brings me to the second question. Would you not then make an honest promise to the consumer? Vineet, would it not help to be a lot more honest, or would it not help to be far more realistic on your delivery dates?
See, again, it's directly related.
Is it competition which is driving everyone to say that I'm going to finish first?
I think it's a liquidity call at that point. Like, for example, our projects, the way we handle projects is we take over projects which are prior approved. So when we launch a project, we know it's going to be execution and our infrastructure, and we work like a manufacturing unit. So if we have delays in project, touch wood, we don't till date, but they're going to be more related to issues like labor, or there's a material issue on cement, steel, stuff like that.
They have capital.
So, you see, the difference is, yes.
They're a fund.
They're a fund. They have the money. So that's the biggest thing.
Liquidity issue
and the bully guys like us.
Yeah, but you see, the issue is we are dependent on guys like them to get the land, because that's their art, right? So we go tie up, and the whole change in Sare is that we've taken the entire execution in our hands. We were never supposed to do that as a PE fund. The whole issue is because we want to deliver on time. Our returns get severely affected.
Very interesting point.
It's
the fact that PE funds who were actually funding the real estate sector to ensure that the projects are completed on time have to get into the development side.
Yeah,
what do you change by being part of the development side? Which again brings me back to, I know that they may be different, they may be delivering in time, but there is a lot of gap when it comes to management and execution within the real estate companies in the country?
See, traditionally, all the real estate large companies, majority of them have been family run, right? You've had a key promoter who's been running probably a generations old business, and he's just going up. Suddenly in the past 3 years, you see this huge volume, there's like an explosion of volume, what you're talking about, but the institutionalization is not there at all. So people like us are just trying to bring in complete institutionalization there. It's not promoter driven. We are not dependent on a Mr. X to decide on the color of tiles.
Okay, that's an interesting point. So
we've got an institution which is working there. You need a professional management. You need a scalable model. Today our model, we are executing 4 million square feet pan India. We are executing Chennai, we are doing Gurgaon, we are doing Amritsar. So we've got a scalable model which is actually just fanned out onto a new project. So when I'm launching, I'm clear, okay, this is my deadline of possession. Yes, there is a force majeure condition and there are certain 6 months grace period, or depending on the micro market condition we need. Now after that, we can be hit by things like material, labor, which are like normal construction delays, or probably even things like you have a lot of infrastructure going on, labor is not available there. Your supply of contractors, when the moment you see high volume, the contractors start getting cheesy. You've got this cement industry where I don't think any analyst can predict a price. It just goes up and down, and it's just so, you don't understand.
Well, the cement lobby actually cries that they don't get the realization they need on per ton of their cement. Yeah, they're not doing well either. But, I'm hearing that, yes, there are lots of variable factors, and
Absolutely.
That's the reason why delays happen. My question, Sameer, is that each of these variable factors now have to be thumbed out. We have to say enough is enough. We need to find a solution to each one of them, because it's not good for them, their reputation. It's not definitely good for the consumer. We've got some figures, Sameer's called them out, a 3-year delay, and that's what we are talking about. If projects which were to be delivered in 2012 are going to be delivered only 2 to 3 years later, there's a huge cost, emotional and financial, to the end consumer, isn't it?
Absolutely. First of all, the average delay in Pan India is about 9.4 months, and more than 55% of the projects do get delayed. That's a very important point. I think the main reason really is steep increase in delivery commitments. Interestingly, capital is not the only reason, because the top 20-25 developers have got maximum bank funding. If you look at the top 5 developers, they've got billions of dollars in private equity and billions of dollars in bank funding. Right. But the utilization of that cash is very important to ensure timely delivery of the project.
You can't generalize. See, I'll tell you this. The top 25 developers don't represent the entire country.
I agree.
We have a Pan-India association where we have 9,000 developers. And out of these, only, I think, in the entire spectrum of real estate, only 6% of the developers are listed. What about the balance 94? They're doing an honest job. They have capital problems. If the big 25 have all the capital in the world.
Not the entire 94, because at the start of the show you told me that the camp is divided between the
we're talking about our association.
Okay, so the entire association of CREDAI, all right.
The basic problem is that then there are balance sheet issues, and that's why banks can't come in and fund that.
Yes.
And that's the big problem.
Sameer, you can't deny the fact that there is a bias towards lending to real estate, because under directions from RBI, the risk weightage to real estate is maximum. Commercial. We have been lobbying with the ministry to give housing an infrastructure status, which is what the World Bank recognizes housing as. World Bank recognizes housing as an infrastructure activity. Once we have an infrastructure status, the banks will lend. They'll lend cheaper. We'll have access to capital. And let me tell you today, these businesses are not necessarily now still run in the old-fashioned family-run businesses. We are professionalizing. I know so many of my colleagues who have professionals working for them. They don't have to, go for small decisions.
Touchy point. Touchy point. That family-run businesses in real estate are not run well. While that's the reason.
Let me finish.
But the example of Sare coming in, maybe some of them are, but not all.
No, what I'm saying is, see, it's not like making a car. That you have a prototype, you put it on the manufacturing line, and you put in the raw material, and it comes out in a particular time. This is a labor-intensive industry. There are so many practical issues. There's even a mason. He has to, if he makes a wall, it's not necessary that he'll make it right the first time.
Oh, they don't. They learn on the job.
Absolutely.
We all know that.
And
there's
we are teaching them.
Single school which actually teaches you how to build a house.
There's a National Skill Development Council. We are actually teaching them on site. So this is an evolving industry, and it's a great industry. Let me tell you this. It gives maximum employment to uneducated, illiterate people who nobody else employs. it actually supports 300 other related industry like the
And
keel banane wala,
it gives
rassi
us
wala.
one of our, forget all of that, it gives us one of the three things which we need for sustenance.
The
That's
makan.
roti, kapda or makan.
Makan, it gives you
You've
makan.
got the makan,
Yeah.
but you've got to give us the
No,
makan in
it's coming.
time. All right, Kalpesh, I'm going to come to you. Why are execution delays different in different parts of the country? What makes Bangalore so much better when it comes to delivery vis-a-vis NCR, which is at the bottom of the pyramid?
I think, again, as with most things in life, there is no one clear answer. From my understanding, the projects in NCR tend to be a lot larger, and also from what I know, the developers in NCR have taken on far more projects compared to the developers in Bombay. In Bombay, it takes you a very, very long time to clear out the land and get it ready to get approvals, etc. And the project sizes, in terms of the number of units or the number of square footage, tends to be very, very small compared to NCR. Delivering a 500,000 square foot project is much simpler than delivering a 2, 3, 4 million square foot project, which is what you see in NCR. I think with Bangalore, I'm not an expert on the Bangalore market at all, but I think approvals in Bangalore are far simpler than approvals in let's say a Bombay or NCR region. Let me tell you, in Bombay, it's I don't want to keep beating a dead horse, but I just want to give the audience a bit more color as to what the approval delays look like. We've had 12 months, the past 12 months in Bombay, where no new projects have been given approvals because the entire regulatory framework on how projects get approved is changing. There's a new code that's being introduced, and while that was happening, there was no new projects that were being granted approvals. Before that, you had an issue where there's a high-rise committee that approves projects that are above 70 meters. That committee got disbanded, and no one knew whether a new committee was going to be required or whether a new committee was going to be appointed or whatnot. Before that, there was a question on whether environmental approvals are a center subject or a state subject. Before that, redevelopment projects in Mumbai, which form a huge component of the total supply, there was a stay, a high court order that stayed all of those projects. Before that, the mainland development projects were all stayed because there were issues. So every year there's something new that comes up, and it becomes almost impossible for developers to predict where things will pan out, and that causes most of the delays in Mumbai and I think in NCR as well. But
right.
Again,
Kalpesh,
having said that,
Kalpesh, I'll come back
developers
to you.
Sure.
We just got to take this very quick break, but what I'm hearing from Kalpesh is that NCR is particularly really looking terrible on the statistics because there was a huge amount of announcements of development, and of course execution then becomes a problem. There was overextension in that period that we've just taken for this study. We'll come back. I think we still need to go back and discuss that very basic point. What does it cause you? What does a delay cost to the consumer? And how do we resolve the regulatory issues? Because labor is one, there are many other issues, but regulatory approvals, which are the bane of the industry, has to be sorted out. Execution delays, that's the big realty debate of the day. You were promised a flat by the builder developer in your city last year or the year before last, and you still haven't got it. You continue to stay on rent, pay a hefty EMI, and you resign to your fate. Don't be, because this is what it costs you. Sameer Jasuja, you've done the numbers and we've looked at the cost of delays. It's a lot. It works out to about 14 to 15%. So if the person has bought a property worth 50 lakh rupees, 15% is the cost of delay per annum of it not being delivered to him.
Absolutely right, and that there are two components that constitute that. One is loss of rent, and one is the heavy interest that he's paying to the housing finance banks, which now today are between 11 to 13%. So there is a rough 50% division between the two, and every year that the developer delays, the consumer loses 15% odd, whereas there are penalty clauses that are imposed on the developer. He pays 5 rupees a square feet a month, but that translates typically only to 1 to 2% of the value of the property. So net there is a loss of 14% to the consumer, but there is one icing on the cake, that is that there is appreciation that has happened in the Indian markets, especially in the tier 1, where the consumer has really got saved, and he's not come for cancellations.
That's what makes him resigned to his fate. He says, okay, my property is appreciating. Yes, please go ahead, but I have a lot of questions for you as well.
No, go ahead, you shoot.
I want to know, when it comes to an execution delay, yes, it's happened for many reasons. There's a document which has been signed which says that we will, compensate the consumer for that delay. That compensation never comes till you go to courts.
No, that's not the case, Manisha, because you're talking of cases which used to happen maybe 3, 4, 5 years ago. Things have changed drastically. We have evolved as an industry. There are delays from the developer, and you see, there are many times that the customer also delays his payments. So you have to look at both sides of the spectrum.
But there the penalty is very hefty.
No, it's equal. It's the same.
I've not heard of a single customer not being extracted of that penalty amount before being given the delivery. The problem is that this entire game is stacked in the favor of the developer. I have taken a loan, I have bought that flat, I am at your mercy.
No, see, there is no compulsion to sign an agreement which you feel is one-sided. If you are a buyer, you have to, before you put up that money on the table, you can read that document, and if you are not comfortable with it, don't buy with that developer. Is there a compulsion?
There isn't, but the problem... And I'm going to read out this email which has come to us, and a penthouse which was bought in July 2005. This is Rahul Jain, was supposed to get possession in 2008 and 9, and we're talking about a boom period, the India shining period, when there was no subprime crisis, there was really absolutely no money or liquidity crunch at that point of time. This was delayed by almost 3 years. I was supposed to get it within 3 years, that is by 2008, maybe 9. Chalo, ek saal extra le lo. Have all the documents. There was a penalty clause. The builders have stopped taking our calls. We've met the directors. They're not responsive. The flat is actually 70 to 80% constructed. It's locked up, and they're not getting the possession. So I buy your point that there's a lot more now in terms of legal documents or what you can do as a consumer. But I'll bring in Mr. Sampath here from Mumbai. Mr. Sampath, what does a consumer do when a builder or developer neither delivers nor gives him the penalty interest that he's supposed to for a delay?
Point number 1, the laws of the land are drafted in such a way that they are 99% in favor of the developers. Practically every political party has got the top bracket who are directly and or indirectly related to real estate. They have got their business interest. Today the sad part is a plumber requires a license to do his business. An electrician requires a license to do his business, but when it comes to builder, the only qualification that is required is a sweet tongue and a smiling face. Builder not naturally blends with the laws of the land and the practical bureaucratic approach, and we know that nothing works without speed money. Municipal corporations are known as nothing but masters of corruption. In Bombay or in Maharashtra, I will say, as a lawyer with about 30 years of practice, I have not seen 1% of the agreement drafted as per the laws of the land. You look at open car parking, they cannot be sold, even a child knows. You cannot sell garages, still parking you cannot sell. Of course, garages can be sold, no issues. You cannot sell terrace. But practically every builder is selling all these things.
Right.
And the penalty is such that they don't mind paying it. Point number 1, they are taking cash. Invariably, that is known to all, one and all. And if one goes to them, he says, okay, you take your white money and close a chapter. Take 9% interest as per the laws of the land.
We're going to come back to you. We understand. So you brought a very interesting point that yes, the odds are stacked in the favor of a developer. You're saying 99%. We could debate on that figure, but we have to come back and still find what's the solution and how will the builder community, developer community get more responsive and honor the contracts that they sign with the consumer in a better way. You keep watching the big realty debate here on NDTV Profit. We're We're discussing an extremely important topic today in the big realty debate, and that's execution delays across the country when it comes to delivery of your homes. Most agreements that you sign with builders stipulate a hefty rate of interest for delayed payments from your side, but search for a similar penalty clause for delays on the part of the builder in handing over possession, and you'll find that there are not too many. Fortunately, despite such one-sided clauses in the agreement, consumers can get compensation from builders for construction delays under the Consumer Protection Act. Mr. Vinod Sampath, a well-known real estate advocate, is with us here in the Mumbai studio. Mr. Sampath, let's just get to the crux of the problem. If the builder does not pay me penalty money or interest that's been promised to me and also delays, how do I get that resolved? Is court my only option?
The solution lies in very simple ways if there is a will. Make most of these offences on the builder non-bailable and you see the fun. Second thing, a part of the project, say 10% of the cost flats can only be sold after the building completion certificate is received and the compliances have been done by the builder. If these two elementary things are taken into consideration, quite a few of the things will go. Now coming to the consumer forums, it was expected within 90 days the delivery will be given, the verdict will come. But let's see, the courts are overburdened. Flat purchasers are literally 99% at the mercy because cash has been paid. The price of the project which was purchased with a budget of 25 lakhs, and when I go there at that point of time, it cost 50 lakhs. So even I know I am being deprived, but I will console myself that instead of a 50 lakhs flat, I am by paying 5 lakhs more to the builder or by incurring an expense of 5 lakhs, at least I am getting the product cheap for 30 lakhs compared to the 50 lakhs things. The need of the day is simplicity of law and holding the bureaucrat responsible, because if I do something wrong, I am penalized. Businessman, builder is a businessman, he is here for business and not for charity. He has valid points. He has to bend to the bureaucrats because they are not accountable. In certain parts of India, buildings take more than 2 years to get the permission, and look at China. They have constructed recently a building in 15 days with so many permissions and multi-storied building I am talking. I am not talking of 5, 10, 20-storied building. If China can construct a building in 15 days, why can't we compete with them in these things? Today even a paper from one office to another office does not move in 15 days. Why are we not holding our bureaucrats responsible for the delay? If I am constructing a building today, I know that I will take 1 year, 2 years. By that time, why is the infrastructure not being improved? Now look at Bombay. We are talking of space constraints. The rates in Bombay are one of the highest rates in the world. I have got a big ocean next to me. Why can't I reclaim land and utilize that for a productive purpose? That will help me.
Very well made points, and I think you've been able to put both sides together. You're saying yes, the agreements are stacked in the favor of a developer, and a consumer will not want to go and fight for a property or for any penalty to be paid to him, especially if he's seen capital appreciation. But the biggest culprit in this entire thing, and that's what I'm hearing from everybody, from Mr. Sampath, from all of you, is really the regulatory approval processes. So that's really the government and the bureaucracy where it's all boiling down to. Yes, labor, yes, liquidity, but the regulatory approvals are big. Kalpesh, I'd like your view on it. What is it that you'd like to change? What will make it possible? You actually put together everything for us and said it's not one thing, it's 6 or 7. But what's the most crucial thing which needs to change to make sure execution delays do not happen in this country, or at least are reduced by a large margin?
You know, there is no one thing. There's basically two things, as I've said. The first is regulations, and you know, every member on the panel has discussed that adequately. The second biggest thing that we can change as an industry, and that is in our control, is how we do business and is our mindsets. You know, Gitambar ji pointed out very well, and Vineet also. You know, most developers in India have been promoter-run, family-run businesses. To be a good developer so far in India, the skill sets that you had to master were: how do you acquire land cheap? You know, how do you get approvals? How do you clear up the land? Building a product, delivering a product, you know, thinking about building beautiful buildings was all secondary. But what is dawning on all of us now, thankfully, is that real estate at the end of the day is a consumer-facing business. You're delivering the most important product that a person will ever purchase in their lives. I think most of us need to now start thinking about what it is that we can do to deliver that product better and deliver it on time. It requires us spending a lot more of our time on execution issues, on design issues, on thinking about the consumer, thinking about how you handle the customer, more so than just acquiring land and getting permission. So I think that mindset change is critical. And right. Markets reward players who deliver what they want, and you're starting to see that. Projects right next to each other in Bombay are commanding, one is commanding 50, 60, 70% premium on a project right next door because it was designed well, the quality was very high.
Absolutely. So Samir has a point here, and a very important point. He's always said that it really works for the builder and the developer to give projects in time. There's a huge premium that he can charge for his next project for that. Yeah, so he should be motivated to do it.
But before that, the solution really lies in having an efficient and strong real estate regulator and being able to ring fence the cash flows of the project. If you can do this, I think projects will not get delayed.
Ring fence the cash flows of the project. Would you agree with that?
No, I won't agree.
Liquidity. Gitambar has said many times that the fact that the funding is not coming that easily, and I would agree with that. If you've not got all the monies tied up, then be a little careful about promising that you will execute a project in certain time, because that's the biggest
regulator
input.
Definitely helps, but it helps to weed out people who are not serious about their work and are not committed.
Which also will help.
Yeah, which will help definitely, but that's only a minor percentage. You're not talking about the big chunk of the problem. The issue here is, it's a perception issue. If you segregate two things, one is land business. The business we are talking about where the delays are, this is home building, this is manufacturing. Land is one aspect. Once you get the land, then you're doing home building. So we have to start thinking like manufacturing. Like our company is only manufacturing. We don't even understand land that well.
But if you had an efficient real estate regulator, and if you could construct like a manufacturer, you had the capacity to construct only 5,000 units, you won't go and sell 20,000
But
units.
Samir, we are already boiling down to the fact that the regulations are causing the delay. Now you want another super regulator who will further mess up the whole thing. First have a single window clearance. Let the government be clear.
Every state government has a different law. Now I'm hearing the solution. Single window clearance.
Every state in this country, believe me, we go mad pan India. Every state explains us their different version of engineering.
The real estate regulator can also hold the government accountable.
Sir, first get the governments together. Make a single window approval, then put a regulator, there is no problem.
Alright, we will come back. It's a large debate on whether we really need a real estate regulator or not. At least for the consumer we do, for the building community or the developer community, it's a different question.
The regulator is definitely coming.
Regulator is coming.
Yes. Because we've been in the meetings with the housing of urban housing and urban property, early aviation, we've been in the meetings. It is definitely coming, and there is a mechanism where you are ring fencing the cash flows up to 70% of the entire revenue.
Are you doing that? Are all developers doing that? Ring fencing cash, because if you have 70% of the project funding tied up, that's a large headache taken off.
Whenever you take funding from a bank, if at all, you have to ring fence the revenues for the bank's comfort. So that is what most of the developers in the organized sector are already doing.
They're not ring fencing with the sales and just taking money from the consumers.
Of course, with the sales.
Even if
So
you
that's
look
what
at the
that's what
Haryana
Samir
laws,
is saying, that you also need the rest of the 30% tied up.
See, I'll tell you, the land component, if you are selling a product, say for 100 rupees, there's a land component in that revenue, and there's a construction component, and there's a profit. So if you would say 30% goes towards my land and profit, then 70% is enough to construct my project. The issue is, where Vineet very rightly said, there are two things that need to be done immediately to actually kickstart this revolution of timely delivery, for us to for us to be able to do it. One is a single window clearance mechanism, which we have already proposed to the ministry and government time and again. The second is make cheap capital available to the developer by giving it an infrastructure industry status.
But first the industry has to pay back the figures, say 1,19,000 crore rupees to the banking
you see the data,
industry.
that's just like Samir very rightly said, it's with just 25 odd people.
Alright, even 25 odd people, it is representative. I think it's a chicken and an egg situation where the banks need comfort because they do see delays in loan repayment. That constant request for loans to be rolled over just makes them a little bit more hesitant. Another
other
big
sectors
debate.
are asking for
Another
it.
big debate. I'm asking you. He's given me his wish list. He says single window clearance. Kalpesh has very, very clearly said professional management. Let's treat it. Let's worry about the execution rather than launch of new projects. I think that's the big one. What would you add to that list? We just want a solution. In 3 years, 4 years, people should not be waiting endlessly for a home to be delivered to them.
Definitely a single window clearance. Definitely. The time for permission should not take more than 3 months.
And do you think the problem will be solved?
To a great extent.
To a great extent. And that's okay. That's a promise from CREDAI that if a single window clearance comes through, then the problem will be solved. So, I mean, you agree with that, or you still think labor issues,
don't entirely agree with
the cash flow? You're still saying it's the cash flow issues, and
I think it is developers
and not smart project
management issues.
Yes,
the management issues are being dealt with because now the market forces compel you to spruce up your act. If you have to survive.
Still not that.
No, Manisha, this is a wrong perception. I'll tell you, it's mostly in the unorganized sector where you see bad stories now. In the organized sector, there are bad stories, but
Sir, I don't want to open my mouth, and I do not want to take the names of certain large builders in this country. We are not here to do any bashing, but the biggest of the real estate developers in the country are not being able to deliver in time.
Manisha, if there was a bad story in the IT sector, that doesn't make the entire sector bad.
All right, but the representative, the 25 top players.
Just to counter your point, like if you talk about the largest developers, they were all untouchable till now. Today you have Competition Council slapping orders which are unheard of.
All right.
So you have people who government is actually taking orders against flat bar agreements. But consumer is a
Okay.
gainer today. Developers are crying.
We can keep talking, but I'm really sorry. We've completely run out of time.
Last interesting point. The same developers, the top 10 developers 5 years ago were delivering on time.
And now
but then they used to construct only 500 units. Yeah. Now they've gone and sold 20,000 units.
That's the explosion. So
and that's the
explosion. Now that's what we're talking about. There is a 1.2 billion population to be housed. It's a mouth-watering market. Developers are saying, let's go out, buy the land and announce a project. 70% you will pay. The rest is what they will tie up with the banks. So lots of missing links, but the industry is getting better, and it's your job and my job to make sure it gets even better, faster. Kalpesh Mehta, Mr. Sampath, thanks very much for joining us on this panel. Vineet, Mr. Anand, and Sameer Jasuja, pleasure. The debate continues on NDTV Profit, on the Property Show every week. If you've got a topic at the top of your mind which you'd like us to talk about when it comes to real estate or property, because it is Roti Kapra or Makan, and it's Makan that we're talking about, write into us at property@ndtv.com. Thanks very much for joining me. Thanks a lot, and see you again.